Thousands of starving people have gathered here to receive food. But as the aid trucks arrive, this happens. The night would become known as the Flour Massacre. By morning, over 100 would be dead. In one of the single biggest mass casualty events of this conflict, the UN has documented 24 attacks on Palestinians awaiting aid in the last 3 months alone.
CNN investigated the notorious Flour Massacre in Gaza, where 118 Palestinians were killed after Israeli Defense Forces opened fire on them as they were gathered around a humanitarian aid convoy in the hopes of getting some food, some sustenance. This was the first humanitarian aid convoy that managed to get to the northern part of the Gaza Strip, where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians remain and they are dying of starvation. Now, to be sure, Israelis and Palestinians have conflicting accounts of what happened that day. This was during the early morning hours of February 29th. So Gazan health authorities said that scores of people had been killed in the gunfire and those injured were treated at hospitals for gunshot wounds, while the Israeli military said most people had been trampled to death in a stampede for the food aid or struck by the aid trucks driving away from the melee. Now, let's talk a little bit about the investigation before we go to some clips showing you what actually occurred. So CNN gathered some never before seen footage of what was happening on the ground, and they did so by talking to 22 eyewitnesses. So these were people on the ground as the Flour Massacre was taking place. Their investigation also traced the aid to a Muslim charity in the United Kingdom known as Ummah Welfare Trust, and reporters spoke to the head of that organization as part of their investigation as well. Now, CNN's report found inconsistencies in the IDF's version of events, so let's walk through that. First, the IDF alleged that they fired warning shots at the Palestinians because they were creating a stampede and endangering the IDF soldiers, who, by the way, were obviously armed in tanks. But that's actually not the case. We'll get to why. So for instance, Mark Regev, the Israeli Prime Minister's special advisor, initially told CNN that Israeli forces had not been involved. Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, the Israel Defense Forces spokesperson, said soon after the soldiers had not fired directly on Palestinians seeking aid, but rather fired warning shots in the air. Now, the investigation done by CNN shows that this is actually not true. Let's watch.
It was the IDF that was then responsible for safely delivering these vital supplies. But we found they opened fire on unarmed, starving Palestinians at close range as the aid arrived. Their explanation for the tragedy using this drone video was a stampede that caused soldiers to fire warning shots in the air. They later admitted to firing some shots directly at so-called suspects who approached them. But the IDF footage is incomplete. It cuts between crowds surrounding the trucks and bodies lying on the ground. Even this reveals they were firing in a densely packed area, likely to cause severe bloodshed. CNN requested the full footage from the IDF, but it was denied.
Wonder why the IDF denied footage that CNN had requested so they can have a more complete picture of what happened, what transpired that day.
Yeah, look, is IDF lying every time they put out a statement? Probably not, but it certainly does seem that way these days. So, but we're gonna back it up with evidence. So first of all, great job by CNN in showing that in this case, the IDF was definitely lying. And they massacred those poor people. But to me, the most relevant fact is that it wasn't the only time, that they did it 24 times.
26 times to be specific.
Right, so people come for food, and in this case, eyewitnesses report them, the Israelis shooting at them as they're approaching to get the flour, for obviously for bread, etc. And then in other instances, witnesses say they get a flour or whatever other aid that they're picking up, they're walking away and the IDF shoots them in the back. So you're telling me that 26 times they accidentally shot people getting food? Okay, I mean, there's still some people who are such zealots that they'll believe absurdities like that. So why are they seem to be shooting on purpose to murder people who are coming to get food who are starving and their families starving. That's why sometimes they'll even walk in, and a lot of the witnesses say, oh, I knew they were shooting, but I had to get the flour because either my family was gonna die of starvation or I was gonna die trying to get the flour. So I went and tried to get the flour anyway. And some guys get shot in the leg and they keep going, etc. right? So why are they doing this? Well, that one's hard to know. There is no documentation on it, but it appears that they're trying to starve them into a state of absolute desperation. Now, what do they do after that? Well, I'm afraid we're gonna find out. But you don't shoot at aid workers like World Central Kitchen on purpose.
Drone strikes,
a drone strike, murder them all. You don't hit aid convoys, innocent civilians trying to get food 26 times by accident. You do that if you're trying to make sure no one gets aid in there. And right now, guys, it's not theoretical. They're starving to death right now as we speak. And Israel keeps blocking aid coming in. They let in a tiny dribble. The part that really gets me every time is that they keep insulting the Western powers that give them billions of dollars, including America and the UK. And they say, we don't trust you. We're gonna have to check your materials because who knows, maybe you're gonna help the Hamas. So we're gonna hold you up, but that's of course not what it is. They wanna delay the aid as long as humanly possible to starve more Palestinians.
Well, look, I actually do not have a problem with the IDF wanting to, do searches of the humanitarian aid. They're concerned that someone might be trying to smuggle in weapons. Fine, even if you don't trust your ally that's helping you fund this war, that's fine. But the problem is, it's not really about doing searches of the humanitarian aid trucks. It's about the weird, arbitrary denials of the trucks entering the Gaza Strip without any explanation, even when there's no indication that there's anything questionable or suspect within the humanitarian aid trucks. Look, that's the problem.
We know what Ben-Gvir and Smotrich's intentions are because they've stated them. They say we want to drive out the Palestinians, absolutely pulverize them, and then drive them into the desert and then take Gaza. Okay, so right now, I don't know if that's also Netanyahu and the entire government's plan, but it certainly looks like that's what they're executing. So that is why they're blocking aid and creating this situation. Guys, CNN's report said they were firing 600 rounds a minute. You're so worried about your safety inside of a tank that you're firing 600 rounds a minute at unarmed civilians. Please. Okay, and anyone who thinks that Israel isn't killing civilians on purpose has totally lost touch with reality. They're out in la la land. And so I know that's 85% of Washington, but you guys sound like lunatics to the rest of us. And so how can you tell who's lying? First of all, CNN proved it. Second of all, did you hear what they said? They say to Israel, show us the moment when the firing started, because you guys say you guys were worried about your safety and they rushed you and that's why you started firing. And Israel goes, no. They edited out that section of the drone footage. Right. Okay, so you're obviously lying. Obviously. Only a person so blinded by bias would notice that they lied about this, they lied about UNRWA, they lied about not killing civilians on purpose. Then we find out where's Daddy program, where they wait for the so-called suspected militant to arrive at home so they could murder his children and his family with him.
Listen, we're gonna keep funding it. Lloyd Austin today said that he doesn't believe that what's being carried out is a genocide. He disagrees with members of the international community who have labeled this as a genocide. And we still get this, defiant treatment from the likes of John Kirby, who seems like almost unapologetic about what's happening, right? That there's something about how Kirby carries himself and how he answers questions during his presser that really gets under my skin, because there seems to be this open disregard for innocent human lives, as long as those human lives are on one side of this unbearable, terrible war. And I can't get over the fact that we're represented by a government that openly on the international stage green lights what's happening to the Palestinian people in Gaza right now. Now, let's get to the second half of this investigation because they found other inconsistencies with the IDF, specifically the IDF's investigation into what happened. Following that investigation, they put out this timeline, and the timeline has all sorts of issues. On March 8th, after an internal investigation, the IDF released a timeline suggesting that the aid convoy began to cross into northern Gaza, accompanied by its tanks, at 4:29 a.m. A minute later, at 4:30 a.m., the IDF said its troops fired warning shots toward the east to disperse crowds before firing at suspects who they claimed posed a threat. At 4:45 a.m., the military said it fired more warning shots. Okay, there's you're gonna watch the video for yourselves. You're gonna see the time that the shootings take place. What warning shots? What warning shots? Let's watch.
The gunfire started earlier than the IDF claimed. The IDF published this timeline saying the trucks arrived at the checkpoint at 4 a.m. They then crossed at 4:29, and only after that did the IDF fire shots at the crowd. But in Bilal's video, filmed 7 minutes earlier at 4:22 a.m., gunshots ring out. He warns there is a tank. The IDF claim the convoy was still stationary at the checkpoint at this time. Next, Jihad begins filming. It's now 4:28 a.m. and there's a barrage of gunfire, and the shots are close. Analysis by weapons experts of the bursts indicate it is heavy automatic gunfire at 600 rounds per minute. Jihad keeps filming. A tank is beside me. We're now under siege, he says. Moments later, you see a truck driving along the road. We spotted traces from the gunfire here. One can be seen ricocheting up here, according to weapons experts.
So there's a mountain of evidence regarding how the IDF is carrying out this war in a way that has complete disregard for human lives, for civilian lives. It doesn't matter that there's a mountain of evidence. In America, we don't like to think of things in a nuanced way. Everything is black and white. So either you fully support everything Israel does and you're not allowed to criticize the military operations they're carrying out, or you're supportive of Hamas. That's the binary that's been presented to the American people, and you must pick a side. Except no, we're not gonna pick a side in that weird, ridiculous, extreme binary, okay? Israel had the right to defend itself by going after Hamas. Israel lost the moral high ground when it became abundantly clear that everyone in the Gaza Strip, regardless of their age, regardless of their sex, regardless of whether or not they're actually a Hamas militant, every single person is a target. Every single person can get killed, and then they justify the killings of those innocent people, right? I don't subscribe to that. I don't defend that. And criticizing that doesn't mean that you disagree with Israel's right to exist, or you agree with Hamas and you believe that they're freedom fighters. Why are Americans unable to see what's happening clearly and make clear distinctions between right and wrong? Why is that so difficult?
Well, look, I think I know the answer, and it's because everyone in power, including the media in the past, would gaslight you. And they would tell you, no, of course Palestinians don't have a right to defend themselves. If they do, they're no good, dirty, terrorist Muslims. You know how they are. And if Israel kills 30 times the number of people Hamas did, as they have here, they say, no, Israel's an angel. And they had every right to kill 30,000, 800,000, it doesn't matter. Israel is the right by definition, and all Muslims, and especially Hamas, are terrorists by definition. So shut up, and they wouldn't say shut up. And people would believe it, they would believe it. I swear to God, if you're young, you can't believe that people would believe that. But almost everyone in America believed that. So now, what's different? The media is doing a much better job. Are they doing a perfect job? No way. We've shown you the massive Israeli bias that still exists, including CNN having to run every story by their Jerusalem bureau. But having said that, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post have done terrific stories showing that the IDF is definitely lying, let alone brilliant reporting from Channel 4 in the UK, The Guardian, etc. So now the press is finally showing the American people in the West what's actually happening in Israel. And now people are horrified by it. They're like, oh, wait, oh right, there's been an occupation for 75 years. These people have been told, you are not human enough to rule yourselves. You will be ruled by the Israelis, and you are to never fight back, never. And if you do, you're a terrorist, okay? But that's okay, fine. You kill civilians, I think you are a terrorist. But when Israel kills civilians and they shoot at starving people trying to get food for their family.
It's called self-defense.
Self-defense. And Hamas was hiding behind those human shields. All this total, utter propaganda. And in the past, I would say it's propaganda and people are like, anti-Semite. How dare you question Israel? Everyone knows that you can criticize every government in the world except Israel, right? And people in America, if you don't live in America, they totally believe that. They thought that like good guys never question Israel. You always say they're right no matter what. Now, do you want to know what drives that? Biden's #1 donor is AIPAC, $11.2 million. If you think he's not affected by the $11.2 million, you're totally insane. You should be checked into an asylum or go get a job in Washington as a reporter because they think that it's not at all relevant. They never mention it in a single story. Who's the #1 donor for the leader of the Republicans in the House, Speaker Johnson? AIPAC, #1 for Ted Cruz, AIPAC. And I can go on and on and on and on. So all of these legalized bribes, but every reporter in the country says it doesn't affect the politicians even 1%, so we will never mention it in any of the stories. Okay, but we live in the reality-based world. Obviously, AIPAC is campaign contributions, sets American foreign policy, period. And Biden says, I cannot believe Israel is killing all these people. I have wagged my finger many times. Send him 14 billion more. Send him 14 billion more. Don't worry, Joe Biden, the check cleared. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.